Gather close, my friends. This is Candlehearth 1600s, where the forgotten corners of history come alive. What did they use before toilet paper? Sit tight. This tale might just change how you see history forever. Tonight, we journey where few dare, into the hidden habits of the 16th century. Behind golden thrones and peasant huts alike, there was one question all shared. What did they use before toilet paper? Sit tight. This tale might just change how you see history forever.
Nature's toilet paper, what ordinary people used. Imagine you're a farmer in the year 1582. It's early morning. Mist rolls off the fields. The smell of damp hay fills the air, and the world is quiet until your stomach gives a low, dangerous rumble. There are no porcelain toilets, no shiny handles, no rolls of soft white paper waiting beside the seat. Just you, the fields, and whatever nature happens to offer. Today, when we flush and move on, we almost never think about what came before. But in the 16th century, everyone thought about it, because every morning meant facing one simple, earthy question. What can I use to clean myself today? For the vast majority of people, peasants, field workers, servants, sailors, and farmers, the answer was whatever was within arm's reach. In villages across Europe, that often meant leaves, moss, hay, straw, grass, and handfuls of soil or snow. The privy, if there even was one, was usually a hole behind the cottage or a shared wooden shed with a simple plank across it. Inside, there'd be a bucket of straw or hay, not for comfort, but to cover the smell and the evidence. Those who lived near rivers or streams sometimes squatted near the water's edge, letting the current take care of the mess. It sounds crude today, but it was simply part of life. Everyone did it. And the idea of privacy? That was a luxury reserved for very few. In poorer areas, a small basket near the outhouse might contain dry corn cobs, bundles of grass, or old cloth scraps. The rich had linens. The poor had leftovers. Regional differences across the 16th century world, people developed their own natural hygiene tools depending on the land around them. In Northern Europe, where the air was damp and forests were dense, soft moss was the go-to choice. Its spongy texture made it surprisingly effective, so much so that it was also used for bandages and baby diapers. In winter, when moss was frozen solid, snow became a brisk but strangely refreshing alternative. In Southern Europe, leaves from plants like mullein or fig trees were common. Mullein leaves were especially prized, large, soft, and slightly fuzzy. People jokingly called them nature's toilet paper. In the Americas, early colonists learned from native peoples, who used materials like corn cobs, animal furs, or smooth river stones. Corn cobs, dried and softened by use, were surprisingly practical. Reusable even. Yes, reusable. In rural England, straw was abundant and doubled as both bedding and wiping material. In the Scottish Highlands and colder regions, tufts of sheep's wool were sometimes used and washed afterward. The choice wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. Whatever the earth provided that day, that was it. Seasonal adaptations, nature's toilet paper, changed with the seasons. In the warm months, broad leaves were plentiful, and soft grass could be twisted into makeshift pads. People even kept small bundles of dried grass near outdoor privies for emergencies. But winter was a different story. When everything froze, options ran out quickly. Moss was stiff, leaves were gone, and the ground was ice. Snow became a substitute a freezing, shocking experience that left even the toughest farmers wide-eyed and awake. Some folks kept a bucket of clean rags or wool scraps indoors near the fire. These would be reused, washed, and hung to dry. Imagine the laundry line, a mix of tunics, socks, and, well, things better left unmentioned: hygiene risks and health problems. As you can imagine, all this came with serious consequences. Poor sanitation wasn't just unpleasant, it was deadly. Outhouses and open ditches attracted flies and rats. Waste seeped into drinking water. Diseases like cholera, dysentery, and typhoid spread easily. Doctors of the day didn't fully understand germs, but they knew filth brought sickness. In towns, people often dumped their chamber pots out of windows, shouting warnings like "Gardez l'eau," French for "watch out for the water." The streets of cities like London and Paris were soaked in waste. And yet, despite the smell and sickness, people accepted it as normal. Cleanliness was not a daily ritual. It was a luxury or a spiritual act. Baths were rare. Even hand washing was minimal. So wiping with a handful of moss was not considered strange. It was life. What the written records say. We actually have glimpses of these habits in surviving diaries and writings. While few dared to write exactly what they did, hints appear between the lines. In England, a few 16th century household guides mention chamberlain straw, referring to straw used near the privy. Samuel Pepys, writing later in the 1600s, occasionally noted the unpleasant smells of his home's small chamber closet, hinting at how basic sanitation remained even among the educated. In the countryside, travelers noted that peasants relieved themselves in the fields and woods as beasts do. Yet these same observers rarely judged them harshly. It was simply the reality of rural life. Even Shakespeare himself referenced night soil, the polite term for human waste collected at night and used as fertilizer the next day. Nothing went to waste, not even waste. Humor and humanity. Now, it's easy to laugh, and we should. History is full of moments that are both strange and deeply human. Imagine two villagers chatting across the hedgerow. "Morning, Thomas." "Aye, good day. I see you found the soft moss early this year." But behind the humor lies something important, a glimpse into how ordinary people lived with the earth. They didn't see nature as separate from themselves. Everything came from the land and everything returned to it, even this most personal of acts. And while it might make us cringe, it also connects us to them. Because when you strip away the technology, we're not so different, still solving the same everyday problems, just with softer paper. The subtle social divide. Even within small villages, there was a hierarchy of cleanliness. A household with access to cloth scraps or wool was seen as slightly better off. Those who used straw or leaves were the poorest. Women sometimes saved pieces of worn-out linen undergarments, washed them carefully, and reused them for hygiene. Cloth was valuable. Paper was rare. So using cloth as toilet material was both a privilege and a risk, because washing it was time-consuming and required precious water. Children were often taught which plants were safe to use, mullein leaves, for example, versus nettles, which caused a painful surprise. These little lessons were part of growing up, as essential as learning to milk a cow or chop firewood. Cultural perceptions of cleanliness. In Europe during the 16th century, cleanliness had moral and religious overtones. The church often viewed excessive bathing as vanity or temptation. A clean soul mattered more than a clean body. As a result, hygiene practices stayed primitive. Contrast that with other parts of the world, particularly in the Middle East and Asia, where washing with water was a daily ritual. Europeans often saw such habits as strange or excessive, not realizing they were far more sanitary. So when we talk about toilet paper substitutes, we're also talking about entire worldviews, about how different cultures define purity, decency, and health. Picture this. A peasant woman in a thatched cottage steps out before dawn. She carries a clay pot of ashes to sprinkle over yesterday's waste pit. It keeps down the smell. A small basket beside her holds bundles of straw and a few pieces of old linen. The frost glitters on the ground. She shivers, does her business quickly, and covers the spot with fresh earth before heading back inside to stoke the fire. It's not glamorous, but it's real. And it's how millions lived every day of their lives. While peasants made do with moss and straw, the wealthy had entirely different expectations. Their toilets weren't holes in the ground, but padded seats and chambers of silk and marble. And in the royal courts of Europe, even who wiped the king's backside could be a position of immense honor. Let's travel now from the muddy village paths to the gilded halls of royalty, where wiping was a matter of rank, ritual, and pride. Cleanliness and class, the privilege of privacy. In the 16th century, the act of relieving oneself was not just a matter of biology, it was a declaration of class. While peasants squatted behind hedgerows or over pits, nobles enjoyed what could almost be called ceremonies of sanitation. In the great halls of Europe, privacy itself was a luxury. The wealthy had garderobes, small private chambers built off castle bedrooms, often set above a moat or cesspit. These stone alcoves, sometimes no bigger than a cupboard, contained a wooden seat with a hole carved into it, leading directly to the pit or open air. The smell could be terrible, but the idea of separation from common filth was what mattered most. For a nobleman or lady, it wasn't about being cleaner, it was about being apart. Servants stood ready outside, waiting to assist, sometimes even holding scented cloths, herbs, or perfumed water to mask the odor. Inside royal courts, toileting was an event of etiquette. Who could enter, who could help, and even who could watch were matters of status. The more important the person, the more elaborate the ritual became. The groom of the stool, royalty's most intimate servant. Among the strangest yet most powerful positions in the English court was the groom of the stool. Appointed by the monarch themselves, this servant had one sacred duty: to assist the king during his most private moments. The stool referred not to furniture, but to the royal excrement. It may sound humiliating, but in truth, the groom of the stool was one of the most trusted men in the entire kingdom. He controlled access to the monarch in their most unguarded state, managed royal finances, and carried immense influence. In the time of Henry VIII, the groom of the stool wasn't a joke. It was an honor. Historical records show these men lived in luxury, wore fine garments, and held enormous political sway. To be the man who literally wiped for the king was to be a gatekeeper of the monarch's secrets, both political and personal. Their tools were equally fine. Soft linen cloths, sometimes scented with rosewater or herbs, were used instead of crude materials. Silver basins, fine towels, and even perfumed gloves were part of the ritual. To wipe a king's royal backside was to show absolute loyalty and to receive royal favor in return. The term throne has a surprisingly literal history. Royalty often had carved wooden chairs, more richly upholstered and decorated, with a removable pan or chamber pot beneath. These were called close stools. The finest of these were covered in velvet or embroidered silk, lined with brass or pewter bowls. Servants would discreetly carry away the waste when finished, often to be dumped into castle cesspits or rivers. In France, some noblemen even received visitors while sitting on the stool. Etiquette allowed for casual conversation, letters, and even business deals during these moments, a strange mix of dignity and absurdity. King Louis XIV of France was known to hold audiences while relieving himself, attended by courtiers who pretended nothing unusual was happening. Perfume, incense, and herbs filled the air, masking the reality beneath. For the wealthy, toileting was not hidden. It was normalized, ritualized, and strangely theatrical. While common folk relied on moss or straw, nobles indulged in luxury cleaning materials that reflected their wealth. They used soft linen squares, washed and reused, often scented with lavender, rose, or citrus oils. Others used sponges soaked in warm water, stored in silver bowls or wooden boxes. Perfumed sachets of herbs, rosemary, mint, and bay, hung inside garderobes to mask odor. Some royals even kept tiny pots of fine sand or ashes, believed to absorb impurities from the skin. In wealthier Italian and French households, bidet-like basins appeared by the late 1500s, used primarily by women for washing after toileting. These early designs were made from porcelain or carved wood, primitive but surprisingly similar to modern hygiene ideas. Cleanliness was seen as a mark of sophistication, even if the science behind it wasn't fully understood. Toilets of the world's courts, a glimpse beyond Europe. Royal comfort wasn't exclusive to Europe. Across the Ottoman Empire, Persia, India, and China, elite hygiene practices were far more advanced. In the Ottoman courts, for instance, water cleansing was standard, not cloth. Palace toilets featured running water channeled through marble pipes with perfumed oils used afterward. In Mughal India, fine cotton or silk cloths were washed after each use, and servants maintained ceramic pots filled with scented water. Meanwhile, in imperial China, nobles used soft papers made from rice or mulberry bark, sometimes perfumed with sandalwood. These delicate sheets represented not just cleanliness, but refinement, centuries before toilet paper reached the West. The European elite considered these customs exotic, even unnecessary, preferring dry methods and heavy perfumes instead of washing. It wasn't until centuries later that the concept of washing with water spread widely across Europe. Royal waste disposal, the hidden problem. Even kings had to deal with the aftermath. Castles and manors weren't known for efficient plumbing. Beneath the velvet and gold, the truth was grim. Many garderobes emptied directly into cesspits, moats, or streams, turning once beautiful castle moats into open sewers. Archaeologists today still uncover layers of compacted waste beneath castle walls, filled with bones, hairpins, and remnants of medieval meals. In Hampton Court Palace, Henry VIII's royal waste pipes often overflowed, creating foul odors that spread through the corridors. Even the finest perfumes couldn't fully mask the reality. Servants were sent daily to shovel, drain, and dump the contents into nearby rivers. Royal waste disposal was a full-time job, and few tasks were less desirable. Luxury had its challenges. Imagine a noblewoman in a tight corset, several layers of skirts, and silk petticoats, trying to sit gracefully on a chamber pot. Court dresses were often so elaborate that attending to nature's call required multiple attendants. Some noblewomen wore garments with hidden slits, allowing them to relieve themselves without fully undressing. In contrast, Men's breeches featured flap openings designed for convenience. These details were rarely spoken of, but were a daily part of life in every royal household. Modesty was important, but comfort was a lower priority than elegance and form. Royal etiquette, when the court watched it, may shock modern viewers, but privacy was not always valued the way it is today. In royal circles, even toileting could be a public affair. Kings and queens often received attendants during these moments, not out of necessity, but as a sign of their supreme status. In France, nobles considered it an honor to hand the king his washcloth or chamber pot. Witnessing the monarch's daily rituals was proof of trust and closeness. By contrast, commoners valued privacy because it was something they rarely got. For the rich, exposure itself was proof of control. It was an era where power meant never having to close the door. Despite all their silks and scented oils, the nobles weren't necessarily cleaner than peasants. They masked smells but rarely bathed. They wiped with linen but seldom washed with water. The poor, by necessity, often used cleaner natural methods, fresh leaves, moss, and ash, that did a better job of cleansing than perfumed cloth ever could. This irony sits at the heart of the 16th century. The poor were forced to live simply, and that simplicity often kept them closer to nature, and unintentionally to real cleanliness. The rich, in contrast, lived surrounded by luxury, yet remained haunted by stench and disease. Royalty had their toilet thrones, but no running water. They had perfumes, but not sanitation. They had power, but no escape from the very smells they tried to deny.
Be ready for part 2, and don't forget to subscribe. Candle Hearth, 1600s, my boy.